Next question. Can you explain the difference and/or advantage or disadvantages of selecting to star in MySQL dump? Um, I prefer select star into out file. I think it's easier. The MySQL dump will be better if you're scripting it. So, for example, select star into out file works well when you're typing the command prompt. But MySQL dump is something you could put into a script and schedule to run at any time. So that's probably the main difference between the two. They both result in an output file. I think if you're in MySQL, and this is easier as a quick and dirty, and if you're scheduling or scripting something, that MySQL dump is probably better. Like for like backups, scheduling backups, um, MySQL dump is probably a better way of doing it. Assignment 4, excuse me. Which chapters of the book primarily focus on this lab? Let's take a look at lab 4. Sorry, well, I'm getting over a cold here. List all languages. Okay, so at least 5 countries and a count. Use the country language table. Add, excuse me. The following. This is simply an insert statement, simple delete statement. So that's going to be one of the early chapters, I think. I think we covered insert and deletes. Well, chapter 1 and 2, the introduction, I think we covered it. And then we covered it again under updating data, chapter 11, for sure. So that's 2 and 3. Listing all languages. Anytime you see list, that's a select statement. All languages that are official language in at least 5 countries and a count of countries that have it as an official language. This is going to be one of your more advanced SQL select statements. Same thing with this one, although not quite as. So the select statement is covered somewhat in the introductory chapters, and definitely in more detail in 9, querying for data. Definitely be there. And increasing the population for each city in Nevada by 10%, that's an update statement. And that again will be covered in chapter 11. So it looks like chapters 9 and 11 mostly is what you want to look at for lab 5, or 4 rather, excuse me. There we go. In your experience, which joins are frequently used at work? Inner joins mostly are usually used more often, but they're all useful. Outer joins are useful, even self joins. The inner join is definitely the most common, but they're all useful because an inner join basically requires a match between 2 tables. An outer join is really the same thing as an inner join, except it makes the match optional, which means you're going to get all data from one table and then whatever matches you find in the joining table. A self join is a join of one table to another. The type of join that you rarely see is something called a Cartesian join, which is where you join 2 tables and you don't give a join clause. That does a Cartesian join, or a cross join, I think it's also called. That's a very problematic join to do because the result is, let's say you have 2 tables of 100 rows each, and you do a cross join or a Cartesian join, then it's the resulting output is total rows in table A times total rows in table B, or let's say 100 each. That's 10,000, right? 100 times 100. And that's on a very small table of 100 rows. Imagine if you had 100,000 rows in each table and you do a cross join. You'd bring your database down. You'd bring the database down. I think the results that would be 10 million or something. You'd bring your database down. So you don't want to do that. The only time I've ever seen cross joins done are in analytical type applications. I've done a few cross joins of data that I did in some of my data analysis for bio. I used to do a lot of data analysis with a cancer doctor at the hospital on his research. We use some cross joins there. But generally, those cross joins are being done against very small data sets, like 10 rows by 20 rows or something. Very small data sets, so that the resulting output is not horribly huge. But cross joins are very rare. Inner joins are the most common, and outer joins are next most common. Self joins are less common, but they're more common than cross joins. And I think that's about the only type of join. I think those are the four types of joins you have: inner, outer, self, and cross, or Cartesian. Is it better practice to use joins instead of subqueries or vice versa? It really depends. For me, this is usually trial and error. You can generally do the same thing between the two. Sometimes you will find that joins are more efficient than subqueries, or subqueries are sometimes more efficient. In general, if you're joining a very large table to a very small table, then subqueries are usually more efficient. However, if you're joining two tables of roughly similar size, then a join is usually better. But that's just a very rough example, or rough practice. In general, I usually go with a join first. I usually try a join first because they usually are more efficient. If I'm having troubles getting the join to perform, and I've kind of ruled out other things like needing indexes, then I will try converting some of the joins to subqueries and see if that works any better. So a lot of times it does. A lot of times that resolves the performance issues. But generally I start with joins. There is a typo for following in one of chapter 13 slides. Okay, well, I'll take a look at that. The following example finds countries on the European continent, and for each one, tests whether the country is among the worldwide list of countries where Spanish is spoken. I don't see an example there, so sorry about that. If you wanted to know how you would do that, that would be a join. You would have to join the country-to-country language table. We can look at how to do that. Still not clear how subquery and join expressions are sometimes equivalent. Can you give more examples? Yes, I can give more examples. Where they're generally more equivalent. Vincent, do you want to ask a question? You have the mic if you do. Okay, I got to hear that. Question is, how do you avoid locking tables or users if you use MySQL dump? What is the rule of thumb? I don't think that MySQL dump should lock the table because it's only extracting the data. But in general, something like MySQL dump is part of a backup, which would generally be scheduled to run at in the middle of the night when very few people would be on it. So, but I don't. It shouldn't probably cause a lock anyway. But the safer thing to do would be to put it on a scheduler to run in the middle of the night. Question is, when will our lab be graded? I graded a bunch of labs, and I'm going to go in tonight and grade more. So, if you haven't submitted your labs via WebSmart, that may be why you haven't gotten a grade back. If you sent it as an email, I'm going to look through my email tonight for those, but I really want them to be web access. Excuse me. I really want them to be submitted via web access. So if you haven't gotten a grade back and you just emailed it to me, try and go in and upload it via web access. Okay.